Right. So without any delay, it is my great pleasure to introduce Monia Baker. Monia commissions and edits opinion articles on improving science for Nature magazine, where she has been working since 2017. Her work has appeared in Nature, Science, Wire, The Economist, Slate, The New Scientist, and many other places. She has degrees from Carleton College and Harvard University. I'm very happy to say that Monia will also be joining us for the panel later on and be a part of some mentoring sessions. So without further ado, let me welcome Monia. Monia,
Hello.
please.
Hello. So I'm not a scholar and I give less than one PowerPoint presentation a year, so I hope you'll be a little indulgent. Can everybody see me, see my
Yes.
slides, hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep. Thank you.
So let's see if I can make this thing work. So I wanted to thank Daniel very much for inviting me today. And I'll be talking today about, I have two distinct parts in my talk that I think are related. One is just the way that different communities are using these two terms that you hear a lot, replication and reproducibility. And then the second part, I'll talk about my job producing opinion articles at Nature and sort of how I work with authors to produce articles that people outside their fields can read and appreciate. So I actually should have added another article to this, but reproducibility worries, I think, started getting a lot of attention when some of the biotech companies said, hey, we're having a problem with the literature. There is one from the Psychologist in 2012, which I think is the first to use the word crisis. If anybody knows, I would love to know. But these two drug companies actually tracked how often they found a paper that they thought was promising enough to maybe launch a drug project. And when they found those papers, they tried to see if they could verify the results. And you can see in most of the cases they couldn't. So Bayer was doing women's health, cardiovascular, and cancer, and Amgen was mainly blood cancer. And these were serious attempts. This wasn't just, oh, let's get the paper and see if I can do it. There were industry scientists going to academic labs. There were academic scientists going to industry labs. These were really, really serious attempts to say, can we believe in these conclusions enough to launch a drug launch a drug project. And people had been, I mean, like Jevin mentioned Ioannidis' 2005 piece, why most scientific literature is false. But this was actually their own experience rather than a simulation. It got a lot of discussions going. And there we go. And then it was done in a more formal way in 2015. This is a psychology reproducibility project by Brian Nosek. They went through, instead of saying, oh, these are the papers that caught my eye, they went through systematically and picked a set of papers from prominent psychology journals, assembled a team. It was beautiful. It was a beautiful thing. It was assembled teams of volunteers to try to replicate crucial experiments in each study. And they made all these different criteria to define whether or not it repeated or not. And you can see that in most cases, the overall conclusion was that no, in 61 out of 39 cases, the replicate did not match the original's results. Now, it's important to say that that doesn't mean that the original results were wrong. There could have been, it could be that there's statistical things that would make studies not repeat, and there were differences between the replications, but this is enough to sort of shake people's confidence. In 2016, sorry, this is a blurry slide. The front half, or the journalistic side of Nature, set out a survey saying, do you think there is a reproducibility crisis? And you can see that 52% said yes, there is a significant crisis. If you dig down and you look at the rest of the surveys, they still think that the majority of the literature is right, but that they think there's enough problems to say that there is a reproducibility crisis. And so a lot of discussion began. There's been at least 3 sort of national level reports, one of them from the UK and 2 from the US, trying to pin down how to talk about this. And there have been so many papers that have been trying to talk about sort of define things. But this is what I see quoted a lot. It's from the National Academy of Sciences in 2019, had a lot of sort of the more computational sides. And just to sum up, the parentheses are me, is they define reproducibility as enough information being supplied so that one can try to redo the experiment. And they define replicability as someone really does repeat the experiment. So among people who follow this, these are the terms that get used, but sometimes they, I think the more important thing that the National Academy's report said is that scientific disciplines are using these terms in different and sometimes contradictory ways. And there was a nice article that just came out last month in PLOS One that actually does all these sorts of textual analyses on different terms and the discussion around reproducibility and replicability. And it basically said, if you are using these terms thinking people understand you, you are more likely to generate confusion than clarity. So if you just look at what sort of settled in Wikipedia is not using reproducibility as enough information is supplied so someone can repeat the experiment. It says that it's using what a lot of the more computational people would say is replication. And a lot of times what you see is people try to thread the needle and they just say reproducibility is a good thing and they don't actually define it, which is not as frustrating. Oh, actually, sorry, let me back up. So just to reiterate, for people who talk about this a lot, reproducibility means supplying detail. Replication actually means redoing this. And I actually asked Brian Nosek if he would rename the Cancer Reproducibility Project and the Psychology Reproducibility Project, those really systematic, intense efforts to try to see how often papers repeat. I said, would you call it the replication project now? And he said yes, but of course, the language wasn't as settled as when that project began. So if someone says your work is reproducible, they might mean that there has been sufficient information supplied. They might mean that somebody could do it and get good results. They might mean that other researchers can build on your conclusions, or they might mean, oh, it's good science. I've heard people use the word reproducibility when they mean being kind in your critiques. So it's kind of this apple pie. It's the apple pie term of science. Just be really careful if you use it, that when you use it, that you talk about what you mean. Now, the saving grace is that efforts to improve reproducibility are going to apply regardless of the actual definition that is used. I mean, documenting your reagents, trying to protect against bias, all those things are going to improve for most uses of the term, but it can really cause some conflict and confusion. So and I think when you see, I think if anybody studied this, I would so love to know. I think that sometimes when you see friction between sort of open science advocates who are often coming from psychology or computational, and you see the biologists saying, what are you talking about? I think it's because there's a difference in this term. Because if someone says, oh, your work's not reproducible, you might mean you didn't give me all the information that I needed, which is much less provocative than your work is not reproducible, meaning your results are wrong, your conclusions are wrong. And I've definitely seen people butting heads when the The problem was that they were using the same term in different ways. And this is an old example, but it's by far my favorite example. So the last two authors here are both economists, and the economists they tend to use the reproducibility as supplying information term. So they put this thing in PLOS biology. Their audience is biologists, and they say they basically did a bunch of back of the envelope estimations and then multiplied the results together to get this number. And so the number needs to be taken with a grain of salt. But they said $28 billion is going to preclinical research that is not reproducible. So that number is going to get interpreted differently if it means $28 billion is going to money where people didn't document the reagents well when they wrote it up, versus $28 billion is going to $28 billion a year is going to produce results that nobody can replicate and might be wrong. So this, it's just really important to realize that the language around this is not settled. And if you're thinking, well, I know, I just won't use the word reproducible because people will understand that in different ways. I'll say replication when I mean somebody's repeating the word. I can see that being reasonable, but there's a danger to that too, because like the experimental design course at Harvard, experimental design courses talk about the importance of biological and technical replicates. So a biological replicate would be having 100 worms in your experiment, or having 5 cages of mice. So those are measures to try and account for biological variability. A technical replicate means that you have a cell lysate and you divide it into 5 aliquots and put each aliquot into the machine to account for instrument variability in your reading. So replication has its own problems as well as a term. And I just want to say that this is the kind of thing, like how things can be misinterpreted, is what I think about all day long in my day job. So that moves me into the second part of the talk. I'm just going to check the chat and see. I can't see the chat, so I'll take questions at the end. If somebody visually do something if you can't hear me. Expert authored opinion at Nature, we have 5 different kinds of articles. We have comments, which are 2,000 words, can have multiple authors. They have graphs. They take a very, very long time to produce. We have worldview columns, which are single authors. They are just 850 words. They have a personal view. They're usually pegged to something in the news, and they tend to get most of their traffic in the first week, whereas the comments kind of have a longer shelf life. People pay attention to them for much longer. We also have these really short correspondence, which you can also call letters to the editor, and these are responses to pieces in the magazines. And then we also have these more reflective pieces. The top 3 are all kinds of calls to action. The others are more reflections. These are on books that have been written, art exhibits, and obituaries. And there we go. Sorry, I think I've went. There we go. At Nature, there are many different kinds of editors. Probably the editors that you all are most familiar with are manuscript editors. They're also sometimes called back half editors. These editors decide whether or not to send articles out for review. They're looking at new scientific findings, scientific manuscripts, and most of their job is assessing the paper as it's written. And I mean, they will ask for caveats and more details and more experiments and that kind of thing, but their main job is assessing the science. And then what I am, we call me a front half editor. We usually have journalism background, so we're coming thinking from the perspective of the reader. Within the front half, there's a lot of different roles for editors. So my main job is as a developmental editor, producing text that I think people will read. Every developmental editor has their own developmental editor called a top editor, who looks at the edited piece and makes sure that it makes sense. Once a piece has been top edited, it goes to a sub editor. That's a British term, and it's similar to what in the US is called a copy editor, but with more responsibility. The sub editor is going to check any arithmetic, is going to check that Syracuse University really is in New York, is going to look for grammar, is going to stick extra vowels in your words if you're an American, and to sort of look at things at the sentence level to make sure everything is correct. We have art editors who produce graphs and hunt photo archives for images that can accompany pieces, and we have media editors who take care of podcasts and make videos. So the things that I consider as a developmental editor, I think about the structure of the article. Are the paragraphs in an order that makes sense? I think about the relevance. This might be something that's very, very important to you, but have you made it clear why a volcanologist or an Ebola researcher cares about your issue? I look at the logic. Does the argument flow? Are the thoughts connected in a meaningful way? Is there evidence or anecdote to make me believe the points of your logic? Is there context and caveats? If the idea is 20 years old, tell me that it's 20 years old. And I look at caveats, important qualifiers that people might not assume. I look at accessibility, meaning that that people outside your field can understand it. And I look at tone, because we don't want to make puns about very, very serious things. We want to make sure that the kind of language fits the piece. So just if I think about what each person producing the article brings to the table, the author is the one with the expertise and the ideas and needs to guard against me introducing errors into the piece. The editor has fresh eyes and ensures that the article is interesting, accessible, and compelling, that people can understand it and that they want to read it. So this is, like I said, I'm not a scholar, don't do a lot of PowerPoint, but I sort of broke the process up into 3 sections, each with its own color. So how does an opinion article end up in the magazine? So I send out a lot of emails. I say I read something in. I read something or I hear something at a conference, and I send an email saying, I heard you were doing this. Do you want to talk about it some more? And then I see what people reply, and things go from there. A lot of times, a colleague at Nature will say, hey, I heard somebody talking about this, and people at this conference were really interesting, and I think you should look into a comment. And then I send an email and have a conversation. I also do get unsolicited pitches, or I see a correspondence that's just comes in and it's 250 words, and I think it would be more interesting, run longer. So bringing an unsolicited pitch in or moving a correspondence up into a longer article, those are rare, but they do happen. So once this sort of like little nub of an idea comes into my desk, there's a lot of back and forth with the author. So I'm asking background questions. I'm asking about upcoming events. Is there something coming up that would make the discussion of whatever's happening more timely? And then I will often ask for proceeds. I'll ask somebody to write 200 or 300 words, just summing up what they want to say. And this is nice because it helps me. I can forward that to other members of my team so we can discuss whether we want to bring something in or not. But it also shows me what you think writing for a general audience is like, and that's a really good gauge. So this can go back and forth with me until I feel like I really understand what someone is saying. And then at some point, we'll ask for a draft. That not always, but very often gets vetted with, vetted with people who know a lot more than me. I do not have any subject matter, I have a very limited, very shallow subject matter expertise. So I need to rely on people who do have more expertise to sort of give me a sense of what's going on. And depending on how that goes, I might bring in a draft. Okay, the green bit is where authors start to hate me, and that's just part of the process. We do a lot of rewriting. I give notes. I ask a lot of stupid questions, and eventually we have an article that we think, the broad readers of Nature will want to read and should read. That goes up for a top editor. This happens again a little bit, and then often we will do another round of vetting, especially if it's on a sensitive issue. We'll bring in a sensitivity reader to make sure we're not putting our foot in our, or do the best we can to not put our foot in our mouth. And this whole process, the green and the black can really take quite a bit of time, especially for the comments. Once it goes into the purple section, the deadlines are super real. So the purple is the production. We have we have people working on infographics. We have people searching for photos. We have people. Sorry, I just realized now I forgot to turn on my laser pointer, so you can't tell what I'm doing here. Sorry. We have sub editors and fact checking. We have all these queries going into the author. Once it feels sort of settled, somebody reads it again to make sure that we didn't throw out the baby with the bathwater. Goes off for author approval. There's a proofreading step, and then it's published. So that's sort of the process. Let's talk a little of the overall process, ending with publication. Let's sort of talk about how the ideas come in. So some of you may have taken courses on how to write op-eds or how to pitch op-eds. So this will be familiar. So just I do read pitches that come in. I don't take them very often. It's much better if it's much better if someone comes through in a recommendation, or if something sparks my interest. We have topics that we're looking for at different times, and so pitches, it's really a kind of a it's just not a very common route to come into the magazine. But if you are pitching, there's some things that I really need to know. One is why why, meaning why does it matter? Another is why you. What is it about you that means that you have the insight and expertise to write about this? I had soon after Biden had won the election, I got this a pitch from an undergraduate who said, we really need a cabinet level science position about science, and I've never seen anybody say this. And we had that very week, we actually had had a piece online already on the magazine from the former head of the Office of Science and Technology Policy saying, we need a cabinet level position for science, and I have been arguing this for 20 years, and here's why it hasn't happened and why it could happen now. So clearly the person who ran that piece had the insight and expertise to write about it, and the undergraduate who didn't realize that idea had been kicking around for a while did not. And then the third main thing that I need to know is why now? Is there something coming up that will make this particularly timely? Has a new president been elected? Are COVID rates surging? Is there an important meeting where this will be discussed? If you these three questions are called the three whys. So I will refer to that by that way, and you may hear other people refer to them also as the three whys. In addition to that, I'm going to be asking, how does this article advance the conversation? And that has to do with, did we or a competitor just say exactly that thing? If so, your pitch won't advance the conversation. And even if it's gorgeous, even if it's if it's way better than the thing I just put in the magazine, I can't take it because it won't advance the conversation. And it's a sad thing when that happens. Then I have to assess, can you make the case to a broad audience? And then I also have to assess, can I work with you? Do I think you're going to disappear? Do I think that you are somebody who can be edited? So I want to just break this into a few tips. And nobody does this. Nobody does this, even though there's classes on it. So if you do this, your pitches will stand out. One is look at the magazine. Don't pitch a 5,000 word article for an 850 word slot. Just take a look, think about word count, think about how many authors, look at reference lists. And so if you say, hey, I'd like to write an article like this, make sure that it fits the formats that we have. Include the 3 whys, those 3 questions I have from the previous slide. And then this one really nobody does. Give me an informative email subject line. So this first one, first opinion article. So first opinion is the article type for a biotech newsletter, good biotech newsletter called Stat, but it's not what, I don't have anything to do with it. And so if I get somebody pitching me for an article type that my magazine doesn't run, I'm probably not going to take it. If I'm in a grumpy mood, I might not respond to your email. Actually, I don't take it personally if I don't respond to your email. Sometimes I'm just disorganized. Don't take it personally. This next one, Nature article, I get that all the time. This tells me nothing. I don't know if it's commenting on a past article that ran. I don't know. I don't know if somebody wants to pitch something. It also is. It also tells me that whoever sent me this email is thinking in terms of from their point of view and not as an author, but they're not thinking from my point of view as a reader. They're not thinking about how do I phrase this as in a way that's going to make sense to the person reading it. And that's the big thing that I need to work with authors to do. So if I see something that just says nature article, not only do I not know what it means, I know that whoever sent it to me didn't think about the fact that I won't know what it means. So these 2 yellow ones are a little better because at least I know what the intent is, but it won't, I don't know anything more about that. And it might be that I'm really want something on, I'm really looking, I'm hunting for somebody who can write about a climate change meeting that's coming up. So if I get something that has climate change in the subject line, I'm more likely to read it that day. Normally I try to read pitches on Fridays. It's just helps me be a little organized. But if I know a little bit about what it's about, I'm more like, first I'm going to think, oh, here's an author who's considering what the reader needs to know. And it also just gives me more to go on. So the both of these 2, this is an article type that I bring in, that I commission every week. They tell me a little bit about what the author is going for. These last 2 already are getting into the 3 whys. How I learned to talk clearly about reproducibility tells me that they're talking about a personal project with personal experience. It's not going to be sort of a disembodied logic idea. It's going to be about a passionate person who is trying to fix science and or trying to improve. So I'm looking for, I don't want bloodless logic. I'm looking for articles that are from a passionate person who is arguing about why what they're doing is going to work. I want them to have some sort of investment in it. So time sensitive tells me that there's something coming up, and so I might need to read it sooner than later. Use that only if there really is something that's time sensitive. And the last one, how to talk clearly about reproducibility, tells me that there's a National Academies meeting coming up. So it tells me it's telling me that there's going to be a reason to run it at a particular time. So those 3 things will really make a pitch rise sort of to the top of the pile. Now I'll just talk a little bit about sort of common stumbles that I see in drafts. The main one is what I mentioned before, is I think a lot of academics they're really used to writing for an audience who's going to read whatever they put out. Like if you're an academic, you are going to read what other people in your field write. You don't really need to seduce somebody or convince them that your article is super interesting, because people have to read it to stay current in the field. That's not the case for the articles that I produce. I'm looking for a voluntary reader. They're going to read the articles because they want to read it. So it's really important to think about what is it that will make somebody read the article, what will catch their eye, how will they know what the relevance is? And similar to that is sort of neglecting the big picture, explaining the importance. Nut graphs and topic sentences. A nut graph is also sometimes called the kernel. Graph stands for paragraph, and it's almost an abstract. It tells people what to expect in the piece, and topic sentences are just telling you why that paragraph is there. And then neglecting the personal take. People, as I said before, it needs to be clear that an opinion article is somebody that's being written by an individual who cares about something. So I just wanted to walk through an article that we ran last month. This is Stuart Buck, and he was at the Arnold Foundation, and he made decisions to fund things like Retraction Watch and the Center for Open Science. So a lot of things that are really getting this movement going. And so in his first paragraph, he basically says what he's done. He says, I was in the room where it happened. So it tells me he's got a personal take. He's got the expertise. And then his nut graph is just 2 sentences that he's seen a lot of change since all this work started, but he's got some worries. And so I know any reader would know from that it's going to go into the worries. It's going to go into how he's seen those worries manifest and how he would see those worries alleviated. And sometimes people think, oh, it's obvious. Sometimes I think, oh, it's obvious. But the way that nature works, we always have a nut graph. Always have a nut graph, and it's always in the first third of the article. So if you can, and it's a good, even if. It's a really good thing to be able to do is to just write that sort of it's almost a friendly abstract. Another common stumble are empty assertions that lack specificity, and these are the kinds of things that academics are used to putting at the very beginning of their articles. There is a growing concern, blah blah blah. There is it is incredibly important, or something that everyone. These sentences just make people zone out, because if you don't already if you're already somewhat familiar with the field and you believe it, you're not getting any new information. And if you don't already think it's important, those kinds of vague sentences don't convince you. So here's an example. You get people saying something really vague, like the issue was a matter of intense debate. And this is, I actually just Googled around to see what was going on in the news at the time around this issue. And yeah, it was a matter of intense debate. Students were showing up at the chancellor's dressed up like zombies because they thought the policy was going to make them into the Walking Dead. Now, okay, if I do this first, now it's the reader who makes the conclusion it was a matter of intense debate. I'm not telling them. I'm not telling them, I'm showing them. So you may have heard the writing advice, show, don't tell. This is an example of showing. And the other thing that's interesting is that even if it's giving information that people might not otherwise have. So the issue was a matter of intense debate is really boring. If you can infuse it with some specificity, it just makes it more interesting and more convincing. Another common stumble that I see is people using specialized language, especially specialized language that doesn't really add meaning. So I had an article that said we need to minimize the most serious health outcomes. They meant preventing deaths, so we said preventing deaths. Another thing is as people like to give formal definitions without providing examples. I think it's if you're in the field, if you're in the field, you're very good at thinking in abstractions, and your unit is sort of the abstract concepts, and that's what you're moving around in your head. But if you're trying to get the information in your head, you really need something more concrete. You need examples. So so here's an example. Somebody was talking about extreme weather events, which are becoming more common with climate change, and then they gave examples: wildfires, mudslides, fish die-offs, and I didn't include the next sentence. The next sentence was about storms, because people need something concrete to grasp onto the words. The formal definition is much less able to do that. Formal definitions really seem to be more meaningful to people who already understand something. And I don't know if you noticed with the biological and technical replicates, I gave you examples before I gave you definitions, because that works better for understanding. And that is, I hope that was interesting. I hope that was useful. I know it's a little different from what a lot of you think about all day long, but I'm very happy to take questions.
Thank you so much, Monia. This is like so helpful. I mean, I just kind of laugh internally when you said, like, probably most of you know how to pitch and write, and I'm like, no, I don't. I kind of learned it as I went. So all of this applies to so much in science and so much to scientific communication, to grant writing, to everything. So you should definitely write a book about this. So thank you so much. So there are questions. So Meng Yi has a question.
Okay, so can you hear me?
Yes.
I am Meng Yi. I was curious about as nature, does they measure the readership behavior to some extent? So if you put out a news article and you monitor how people read those articles, for instance. Secondly, like sometimes I guess you can even do some A/B testing, put different versions and so monitor and so improving every aspect. I was always curious about that, how people was reading those articles. So that's a question. And I think there's a lot of collaborations can do between academies and the journals to jointly improve the readership and the communications in all aspects.
Yeah, we do have a social, I didn't put this on the list, but we do have a social media editor who's done some sort of informal A/B testing. I don't think they've done a lot of formal A/B testing, and I know which articles have a lot of readership from week to week, but we just changed our system. I can look at that. I don't do it very systematically. We do know that most of our readers come from biology, and we get sort of like a little brief. We have these weekly meetings, and we get sort of a little overview of, you know, this article did particularly well in this country, or this article did particularly well from people coming from institutional addresses. It's not something that I look at very systematically, and maybe I should.
I think maybe there's a chance to collaborate with academies, because this is again another kind of metrics that might do something that I have been seeing some news article optimizing for readership. If you don't look at a science article, the other many news article, I'm sure they do that way, but maybe we can turn that into something good and design a better way of looking at that. I believe I once see Jeremy Wester's work about how to looking at scientists read articles, but anyway, he might have more things to say. Thanks.
Thanks.
Han, go ahead.
Thank you, Monia. This is a very interesting talk. My question is about how like publisher or journals react to like science of science community. Like you have talked about reproducibility, and how do like a journal like Nature consider this problem, and do you have any plan or any actions to fight against this kind of issues or other complaints from our community? This is
could you be a little, so I should say that I don't make journal policy. I think about what articles to bring into the magazine. I know that we do have back half editors, and we have sort of people over the back half editors that are thinking a lot about how to make sure that communication is I mean, I worry about misinformation, but I think about it in terms of, okay, whose voice do I want to bring into the magazine to run a column? So that's the level that I think about it. There are people at Nature who think about it at a much broader level, and I'm not sure if I answered your question.
Okay, I think I get you. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
We have a question from Hannah.
I have lots of questions today. I was curious, so you talked some about how you have people check to do things like make sure you're not putting your foot in your mouth, or yes, otherwise just making sure that the content when the article is almost ready is good to go. What about like, how do you decide when to use loaded language. Like today we were talking about the reproducibility crisis and you were like, when did that term come up? But how do you decide when to use that kind of term that is provocative and unsettled? Like the issue is unsettled.
You know, they're just really long conversations. You know, it's really kind of we do, like, we now capitalize Black. We now say all genders and not both genders, and that was actually a sub-editor's decision. And they had the chief of the sub-editors went out and actually wrote a new style guide. So that was a very formal process. I think I mean, I wrote the article that has that survey in it on reproducibility crisis, and that language was actually already quite common. So I didn't think about it a whole lot. And then when Nature put it in a headline, there was a lot of, we can't say this because it's going to undermine scientific credibility. And I was very careful when I wrote that article about, like, there's graphs that say scientists believe in science, and it was within the text. I think it was not alarmist. I think because that term was so, and it was in one of the top headlines. I think because that term was so well used, I still think we were justified in using it. And just I generally think that arguments against self-criticism are undermining, are self-sabotaging. I think it's really, there was a survey that came out from Pew, the Pew Research Foundation last year, which found that the feeling that scientists critique themselves makes them more credible. So but we have an awful lot of conversations. I mean, like, there's actually a lot of conversations about whether or not to cover something. So there was a really awful GMO study that wasn't really a study, and I remember in the news, I remember just really long conversations about whether or not it deserved a news article, knowing that it was a flawed study, and whether it should be given that kind of attention, or whether we should, when the criticism came out, whether the article should, whether we would want to cover the criticism. And there's just there are there is a lot. We just talk a lot about individual words, and we bring other people in. Like, I had a piece from by an Israeli author who I can't remember what he and he was referring to, he had this particular description of people at a museum for human evolution. And so I had a lot of talks with my boss and with somebody else, and then we talked to one of our common freelancers from Israel, and we it was like I talked to 5 people about the use of one word. And I think we have to do that. And now I should say, I'm saying we did that when we sometimes things just sneak up on us. I mean, there's definitely dumb things that Nature does, even though we have the best of intentions, but we try to be alert, and we talk a lot, and yeah, we do our best.
Thanks.
And with that, we do our best. Let's thank Monia. Thank you so much, Monia, for your wonderful presentation, and please write a book with all these great insights from the trenches. So we're gonna take a quick 3-minute break, human break, so that we can do some maybe drink some water, and then we'll come back to Louis' talk. Thank you.